This man spent 80 years of his life teaching that God is a meaningless question. Then his heart stopped for 4 minutes. And when he woke up, he said something to his doctor that would betray his entire life's work. "I saw a divine being. I'm afraid I'll have to revise all my books and opinions." His name was Alfred Jules Ayer. To the academic world, he was simply A.J. Ayer, the most famous and influential atheist philosopher of the 20th century. The man who had convinced entire generations that even saying the word God was a logical absurdity devoid of meaning. But in the 4 minutes his brain was starved of oxygen, his consciousness hadn't gone dark at all. He was somewhere else. And what he saw opened an irreparable crack in the fortress of pure rationalism he had built over 80 years. Ayer was no ordinary skeptic. He was the undisputed leader of logical positivism in the English-speaking world. In his 1936 masterpiece, Language, Truth, and Logic, he laid out a devastating theory known as the verification principle. According to Ayer, a sentence only has meaning if it can be empirically verified through the 5 senses, or if it's a mathematical truth. As a result, statements like "God exists," "the soul is immortal," or "there is life after death" weren't simply false. They were, from a logical standpoint, literally meaningless. They were nonsense, white noise with no cognitive value, comparable to made-up words. Ayer had convinced universities across half the world that theology and metaphysics were nothing but outdated linguistic superstitions. He had reduced the creator of the universe to a grammatical error. But we shouldn't picture Ayer as a dusty academic cut off from the world. He was a genuine celebrity. He loved nightlife, jazz, fashion, and high society parties. During the Second World War, he had been a secret agent for MI6, accustomed to danger and cold nerve. His intellectual and physical courage was legendary. In 1987, at 77 years old, he was at a party in New York when he noticed a young, furious Mike Tyson, at the height of his athletic ferocity at the time, harassing and then unknown Naomi Campbell. Without a shred of fear, the elderly professor stepped between the heavyweight champion of the world and the young woman. Tyson, incredulous and furious, snarled at him, "Do you know who the hell I am? I'm the heavyweight champion of the world." Ayer, adjusting his glasses with icy calm, replied, "And I am the former Wykeham professor of logic. We are both preeminent in our fields. I suggest we talk about this like rational men." That man feared nothing, not the brute force of boxers, nor the idea of eternal nothingness. In the summer of 1988, Ayer was hospitalized in London for a severe case of pneumonia. Despite the illness, his critical mind was intact. One evening, while trying to eat a piece of smoked salmon, a fragment blocked his airway. Within seconds, oxygen stopped reaching his brain. His heart slowed, until it stopped completely. Doctors immediately activated the emergency resuscitation protocol. As far as official medicine was concerned, Alfred Jules Ayer was clinically dead. For 4 excruciating minutes, the man who had explained to the world that consciousness is nothing more than a chemical byproduct of the brain found himself without a functioning brain. And yet, in that biological void where nothing should have existed, his mind opened onto a reality that no logical formula could ever have predicted. When Ayer opened the eyes of his consciousness in the afterlife, he did not find the darkness or the nothingness he had so fiercely defended from his lecterns. He found himself immersed in a red light, immense, blinding, and painful. In his later account, Ayer described that light not as a physical phenomenon, but as a presence endowed with will. He wrote that he had the immediate and absolute certainty that this extraordinary light was responsible for governing the universe. The philosopher who had declared the idea of a supreme intelligence to be a meaningless invention now found himself in the presence of a sovereign force holding the reins of the cosmos. But the experience became even more complex and dramatic. In that extratemporal dimension, Ayer perceived the presence of two entities he called the ministers of space. The cosmos appeared misaligned to him, like a puzzle whose pieces had been fitted together wrong, creating a distortion in the laws of physics. With the typical mindset of a logician determined to restore order, Ayer felt it was his duty to intervene. In his disembodied state, he recalled taking out his grandfather's old gold pocket watch, spinning it frantically to attract the attention of the ministers of time, and convince them to set the coordinates of the universe right again. This seemingly bizarre detail reveals the essence of the human soul. Even faced with infinity, the human intellect desperately tries to apply its limited categories to control the uncontrollable. But earthly time was about to reclaim him. With one last, desperate round of chest compressions, Ayer's heart began beating again. When he opened his eyes in the physical world, the philosopher was visibly shaken. He was not his usual cynical, detached self. His first reaction wasn't to rationalize what had happened, but to share his astonishment at what he had experienced. A few months later, in October 1988, he wrote an article for the prestigious magazine The Spectator, tellingly titled, "What I Saw When I Was Dead." In that piece, Ayer had to make a striking, public intellectual retreat. He wrote, in his own words, "My recent experience has slightly weakened my conviction that my death will be the final end of me. I continue to hope that it will be, but I have to admit that I now think it rather less probable." And yet, for a philosopher who had built his entire international reputation on militant atheism, admitting a full conversion would have been academic suicide. In the months that followed, driven by fear of judgment from his Oxford colleagues, Ayer publicly tried to walk it back. He wrote a postscript claiming his vision was probably just the result of an oxygen-starved brain producing hallucinations. But if that was the public face he had to present to the academic world, the private reality of his heart was something else entirely. Those who were close to him in those final months of his life noticed a radical, almost miraculous change in his temperament and in his words. Dr. Jeremy George, the physician who cared for Ayer during his final days, revealed years later a detail that had never appeared in any newspaper article. The doctor recounted that Ayer, far from the notebooks of journalists and the pride of university lecture halls, whispered to him with tear-filled eyes, "I saw a divine being. I saw a divine light. And I'm afraid I'll now have to reconsider and cast doubt on my entire life's work." The man who had claimed to erase God through syntax found himself disarmed in the face of evidence of his presence. Ayer's wife, Dee Wells, confirmed that after that incident, the philosopher had become remarkably gentler, more compassionate, and more open. The icy armor of his logic had melted before the warmth of that mysterious red light that governed the world. There is a profound, divine irony in the end of A.J. Ayer's life. This was a man who had argued that one couldn't speak of God because God wasn't verifiable through sensory experience. And yet, God answered Ayer using exactly the method the philosopher himself demanded: direct experience. He allowed his heart to stop, shut down his physical senses, and granted him an empirical confirmation of the afterlife that no treatise on logic could ever refute. Ayer died for good in the summer of 1989, less than a year after that experience. But he did not die as the arrogant atheist he had been his whole life. He died as a man who had looked beyond the veil of matter and discovered that reality is infinitely bigger, more mysterious, and more merciful than our small human minds can conceive. The story of A.J. Ayer reminds us that intellectual pride is often the hardest cage to open. We can build the most brilliant theories, write the most sophisticated books, and gather applause from the whole world for our supposed intelligence. But faced with the majesty of eternity, all our words reveal themselves for what they truly are: dust returning to dust. God is not proven with a mathematical theorem. God is experienced in the silence of a heart that surrenders to the truth. God's love is so immense that he did not hesitate to reveal himself even to the man who had denied him for 80 years, offering him one last, desperate glimmer of light before his final journey. Today, this same truth speaks to each of us, reminding us that true wisdom does not lie in claiming to understand everything, but in having the humility to welcome the infinite. We want to close this reflection with a prayer that touches the heart of this extraordinary lesson in humility. We invite you to write it in the comments below this video as a personal promise and a profession of faith before the greatness of God. Lord, free my mind from pride and give my heart the humility to recognize your presence in all things. You are the light that governs the universe, and in you my soul finds rest for eternity. Amen. May God bless us all.